Welcome to Scandinavian Mind Weekly, our show about the current trends and events within business, tech, fashion, design, culture, and more, from the Nordic perspective of our team of editors and contributors. Today in the program, we get a direct report from Metaverse Fashion Week that recently took place at Decentraland. We look at what legacy institutions like Selfridges, Etro, and Dolce & Gabbana were doing in this new digital space, as well as the new digital players like the Fabricant, Dematerialized, and DressX. Exciting stuff. I'm Konrad Olsson, editor-in-chief and founder of Scandinavian Mind, and I'm here with my dear colleague Erik Sedin and our editor-at-large, Oliver Dahle. Oliver, our man in Italy, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. Glad to be here.
It's exciting to have you here, Oliver. Obviously, a long-time contributor to Scandinavian Mind and even Scandinavian Man before that. I think we've worked together for about 5 years now. But readers of Scandinavian Mind can recognize your name from our columns online. But maybe just describe yourself a little bit. What you do when you're not working for Scandinavian Mind.
Yes, of course. As you said, we have been working for some time now, and it all started when I did my bachelor within fashion studies at the Lund University, when I started to intern together with you when it was Scandinavian.
Yeah, we're going way back now. This is 5 years ago, and now you're a professor at the Lund University, or lecturer.
I wouldn't say professor, lecturer. The titles are very important in the academic world. So lecturer, I think, is the English title in this. And as you said, I'm based in Italy, and more precisely in Florence. Here I've been lived for almost 3 years now. And the reason why I'm living here is because I studied at Polymoda, where I did my master's in fashion marketing and communication. And after graduation, which happened during the pandemic, me and my girlfriend have stayed to live here, let's say.
So you're really spending your physical time at the heart of the fashion industry, where it all was born. I think the first fashion runways was actually held in Florence back in the day. But we're going to take a look at the new frontier of fashion today. You were kind enough to give up a couple of days of your weekend recently to visit the Metaverse Fashion Week that recently took place at Decentraland. Obviously, listeners of this podcast know this is a space that we've been covering ferociously the past year, and the upcoming, or the new print issue, the issue 3 of Scandinavian Mind, is totally focused on the digital fashion. And I really feel like had we sent to print just a few weeks later, we naturally have included this report from the Metaverse Fashion Week. But I wanted to sort of dedicate this whole episode to this report. There is a written report that you have done titled "We Visited Metaverse Fashion Week So You Don't Have To," kind of tongue-in-cheek. So I really wanted to have you on the show for the listeners to hear what you experienced and your takeaways from it. So maybe just set this up. What kind of event is this really, and how did you get into it?
Yeah, firstly, how I got into it. We can start with that. I think it was announced earlier this year, like UNXD and Decentraland will launch this Metaverse Fashion Week. And when the news broke out, no one really knew what is going to happen. What will this be? Is this needed? And, all these things. I also went back to an earlier podcast episode when you talked about this. And, I think you asked yourselves, oh, what will this be? And will people go there? Will this just be a YouTube clip or something? I don't remember the exact phrasing.
Exactly.
So I think that was maybe the starting point when I first heard about it. And as many, I was quite skeptical. And when was that like 1 week, 2 weeks ago, you start to see like this brand will show, this brand will be there. It became more and more news about it, and it became sort of a buzz around the whole Metaverse
Mm.
Fashion Week. And um, yeah, I got quite intrigued because as I wrote in the piece, I've like reported on this whole digital fashion trend, like read a lot about it. All the NFTs brands are creating and minting and selling for enormous
Mm.
amount of money. But I never really like engaged in it with it personally because I don't know. Um, I don't know about you guys if you do it regularly or like follow buy NFTs, engage in metaverse worlds or anything like
I
that.
guess
But yeah,
professionally, we've been speaking about it for quite some time now. I've only dipped my toes in like the central land and stuff, but not so much on my like. It's been strictly professional. My relationship with
Well, that's
NFTs, I
definitely
guess.
our perspective here, and we have done immense coverage of it, but it's not the same thing as to be personally engaged. And I haven't been into any of these metaverses, as you call them, and Decentraland is obviously one of the most prominent metaverses out there. So that's kind of why I thought this was exciting, and the approach that you had or that we had when covering this story is really sort of sending our reporter to the fashion week, similar to sending someone to a physical fashion week in Paris or similar. So really having you go to all these events is entering this space and dedicating quite a lot of your time, obviously for you physically in front of the computer down in Florence, but digitally and mentally in this metaverse. And just a note that I it was really fascinating to see, as you mentioned, that after announcing the fashion week, and I think we talked about this in our podcast episode when the announcement came, that you know saying something is a fashion week gives it immediately kind of an official aura. And as we know in the startup world, being first is key here. So I think there is something to the fact that Decentraland has sort of they're owning this space. Is that your sense too, that they're kind of grabbing a hold of this term fashion week, or maybe will we see like a sandbox fashion week perhaps?
yes and no. Because I made an interview with David Cash earlier this week. He is the head of a company called Cash Labs, which organized the Cash Labs
Mm,
Gallery, which was a sort of NFT art show with a lot of fashion brands. And they had a film screening with Show Studio and so on during the Metaverse Fashion Week. But he also was the curator of the Metaverse Fashion Week as
mm,
a whole. And he explained to me that the organization behind this Metaverse Fashion Week chose the name Metaverse Fashion Week because in the future they will see, or they hope that this will develop to become several metaverse spaces, like joining in together. Because worth mentioning here is that Decentraland is an open metaverse space. It doesn't keep you in Decentraland.
right.
You can click on links and then come to other spaces, and you can come to other Web3 spaces, other Web2
Mm,
spaces. For example, during Metaverse Fashion Week, I was at I don't know how many platforms. I was on Discord, Twitch, Instagram, Twitter. I listened to a Twitter Hangout, or what it was called for the first time. YouTube. You're just like being passed around the whole internet. Of course, I also was at OpenSea and different marketplaces where all these things are sold. So to answer that question, it depends like how the development will be. in this.
So
But
it
I
sounds like
really
they're
don't
really
hope it
taking
will
this
just
whole
be.
official Metaverse Fashion Week concept seriously. They want to include other metaverses. They want it to be a sort of communal event for the whole community.
Yes, definitely,
Exciting.
definitely. And this is also the thing, how they like everyone's VIP in the metaverse. I think it was
Mm,
marketed as such. And so, yeah, they really want to try to connect like Decentraland, Somnium Space, Sandbox, and that maybe in a future fashion week will be like consecutively at all these
mm.
platforms. Um, Take for example Gucci. They announced that they will be on Sandbox, and it feels like a very official collaboration between those two. And so, yeah, I think in the future, or I hope that in the future, the Metaverse Fashion Week will be on all these spaces at the same time, and not that we will have 10 different Metaverse Fashion Weeks.
Mm.
I don't know, because that
Yeah,
doesn't really make
that's
sense.
really interesting because of course you can have the Fortnite Fashion Week or the Sandbox Fashion Week and then the Centraland Fashion Week, and we've seen those kind of already. This is real. That's really cool that David Cash told you that, and
Mm,
from your experience too, how you were sent around to all these places.
mm.
Also, like you said, you were sent around to these like Web 2 places mostly. I guess Instagram, Twitter. They're still kind of in the need for these old school or whatever places. They're not really completely depending on
Well,
themselves here.
that
They need some pull
I
from
think
an
that
Instagram,
just feels
Twitter.
natural to me. That if you go to a physical fashion week, you see everyone like on the phone scrolling Instagram simultaneously as they're watching the physical show. So
Yeah,
so the fact that a sort of a Web 3
yeah.
fashion week also take use of Web 2 platforms only seem natural. But so continue explaining a little bit what is the situation here? How does this work? And maybe start with the fact that you had to pick out your own wonderful little avatar. And I think we should link this in the perhaps even having it as a cover. I think we have it as a cover on the article online, but we should do it for the podcast as well. And there's a wonderful sort of carousel post that you put on your own Instagram with an image of yourself physically in Florence with a striped shirt, and then your digital avatar, which you had somehow constructed. So tell us about that. I think that was a lovely detail.
Yeah, so that was like one of the first things I did when entering Decentraland. And um, yeah, so then you start to like, oh, what will I look like? What does my eyes look like? What sort of mouth do I have? And skin tone, everything. But then it was time to like choose the clothing, and like working with fashion, the metaverse have been seen as like, oh, this will open up all the endless
Mm.
possibilities to do like whatever you want. You could be whoever you want to be. Like only your imagination could um, set the limits here. But so I started and like, this was a nice shirt. Well, maybe a pair of jeans wouldn't be so bad. And like, oh, well, the spring is coming, so maybe I pick a sort of like summery sandals. And then I entered Decentraland and I just thought like, shit, this is me in real life. Like, this is me.
So do you feel like you were not expressive enough, that you did sort of like that the first iteration of you in an avatar was too similar to your physical style, that you should have been more? I mean, I've seen pictures of people with sort of dragon wings and stuff like that. That's really sort of far out there, and obviously stuff that you uh, can't do in physical life. It's something that you can do in the metaverse space.
Yeah, I thought like, oh, this is a nice, sleek outfit which could work for a fashion week. But when entering Decentraland, you see all these like, I don't know, people walking around with a skull, like as you said, wings, clothes that are glowing. Maybe they have a fleeting pet on their shoulder, or I don't know. Uh, So yeah, in the Decentraland context, I was maybe not the most appropriate.
Could I just ask, like, for like a nerdy tech level, when you were designing, how many clothes could you choose? Could you choose the color and the fit, or were you impressed by like their catalog, their portfolio?
Not impressed. There was a lot of options, but I couldn't really like customize them or anything.
Okay.
But there was quite some options. But also worth noting here is that when I entered, I didn't really have any wearables myself or anything, because
Exactly.
you're supposed to obtain them from like either buying them or being gifted or whatever. Yeah. So that was an experience to see like what people look like in the
So talk about
metaverse,
how. So
because
from there, entering the space. I mean, obviously there was a schedule with different events at different times, like any other fashion week. So how did you interact with the other visitors or avatars in the fashion week?
yeah, so there wasn't that much of interaction, I must say, because you have this. Um, I would like to call it in-game chat, but it's not really a
Yeah.
game in that sense. But you get my point. Where people could write and everything, but people didn't really interact with
Right.
each other. It was much more like statements. Oh wow, cool, to the moon, let's go, or like just asking, how do I see this movie? What is this? Where am I? Why is this
All right.
black? And you know,
Some
and
confusion
like
going on.
when do yeah, a lot of confusion, and I think that's understandable because many people like me were there for the first time. So, and I guess a lot of people isn't really used to being in these spaces at all. Um, Me, for example, I have been like when I grew up, I have been playing like RuneScape, Zelda, Habbo Hotel, and everything, and it's very similar to these like old virtual worlds in that sense. Like you walk around, you could interact with people. You could do your own thing if you want to. You could just like run around or whatever. And so to me, like having that knowledge of the old virtual worlds, it was quite easy. But for some, I guess it's very much a new thing being an avatar on your computer. But like, what should you do? Where do you go? Like, what is the point of it? You know.
Of course.
But so yeah, the interaction part is very like. It really didn't existed.
So talk about
I think some
some of
people
the
tried like
So talk about some of the events that happened then. But as you mentioned, for this, take the Selfridges store opening for instance. That was scheduled on I think it was a Wednesday last week, or the week before that. How does a thing like that happen in a metaverse like Decentraland? In a physical space, you log in with your avatar, you walk there, or you end up there somehow. Click yourself into this space. Explain it and kind of describe it in detail, because I really want to wrap my head around how this works and what happens, as opposed to a I know whatever everyone can understand a physical store opening. We've all seen sort of Zoom versions of it during the pandemic. We've seen a video version of a physical opening. This is a completely digital one. How does it work?
well, so from the exact beginning, you could either like just go into Decentraland, and then you will end up at Genesis Plaza, I think it's called, which is like the center of Decentraland. And from here, you could like go wherever you want. Let's see. which you could do through the map. You see all the locations or whatever. But the most convenient way to do this, especially during Metaverse Fashion Week, was to go to the Decentraland events page. And then you could click on the event, and then you get the coordinates to the event and just get located there right away. And then you just pop up in this location. And so take, for example, the Selfridge opening. Then I popped up in a space like a field or something. Didn't see quite a lot, but then I turned around, and then there was like this huge Selfridge store right in front of me. And it was, I think the Selfridge store itself was really cool. And they tried to resemble their physical store in Birmingham, I think it was. And I think they have made a really good job on that one, especially on the outside, like really cool architectural work. So then I walked there, was greeted in the door by some store assistant or something, like, welcome, glad to see you here. Hope you have fun in the store or something. Then I took the elevator to the top floor, got some information like this is what we are showing and everything. And then you could just walk around, see the NFTs, and yeah. And yes, the Selfridge store opening was quite empty. It was like me and 3 or 4 people there when I was there. So it felt, so it was not like a party mood or something. It was very, I don't know, sad in that sense.
Do you have a sense that the Selfridges did this only for the Fashion Week, and they want kind of like, as you know, as with any Fashion Week, it's a PR event, and you want to get excitement and people talking about it, or will they do stuff? Was there any talk about doing stuff in the long term, using this space for other events, or engaging consumers, or as such?
I don't know about Selfridges in detail, but what they have done is that they have bought like land in
Okay, so that's kind of a long-term investment, right?
Exactly. Other brands more like cooperated with like organizations that already own land in Decentraland and open up like shopping streets or sort of malls, or, as I mentioned earlier, galleries and things like this. So I think there is a clear distinction between the players that buys their own land and the ones that just like gets invited to take part of this.
So maybe we should jump to the runways, because there were actually, as with any Fashion Week, runway shows. So what does a digital runway look like? I think Etro was one of the brands doing runways.
Yeah. So as I mentioned, with the organizations that set up Shopping Street, one of these were the UNXD that had a luxury fashion district. And they had also made like a sort of futuristic runway space there, which was huge. It was like, compared to other buildings I saw there, it was like 10 times a regular house or something. But so in that space they held the runway shows, the brands that cooperated with UNXD. And one of these was Etro, it was Dolce Gabbana, The Fabricant, Dundas, I don't know, and maybe some more. I might be missing someone here. But so you get to that space, take a seat, or You really don't, because everyone's standing, and um, all the shows started exactly at the time um, they were scheduled.
Very dissimilar from a traditional fashion week where the shows always start too late.
Exactly, exactly. And this was a shock to me, because the first show was Dolce Gabbana, and I was like 5 minutes late. And I thought, oh no, it won't be any problem, because it will start in like 20 minutes. No, it didn't. So when I got there 5 minutes late, it was already in full bloom, and that was kind of sad, because the shows are very short as well. So I saw maybe 4 looks or something, and then it was over. Yeah, it's hard to say. Like, I wrote in the piece that there was one user writing in the chat, and I think has to do with like the confusion thing. Like, the user wrote, "What is the point with these shows?" Or like, "What is the point
Yeah.
of this?" And honestly, I don't know either, because it went on so quick. You couldn't really see anything. Maybe like the graphics were lagging or something. So yeah, the runway shows were like yeah,
Well, talk about
hard
the
to
actual
really
fashion that was
see.
displayed, and I'm wondering if there's a lost opportunity to actually do something that's enters into maybe like a version of the physical runway show. Uh, because I see some of the brands, I think Tommy Hilfiger actually showed real physical clothes, or like images, or I don't know what, videos or something of real models with like physical clothes, shot like a physical lookbook. But I'm thinking like metaverse uh, concept. One of the biggest reasons for doing it is, of course, you can gather people from all around the world at one same place. But it doesn't necessarily have to be that you have to show the digital garments. So what was the balance there? I've seen actually also the true digital iterations of Dolce Gabbana and Etro, but what was the balance there?
Mm, do you mean like brands showing digital or showing physical
Yeah,
clothing?
exactly. What was because some showed obviously physical clothing and some showed digital avatar clothing.
Mm, yeah, I think most of the things I saw in Decentraland was either digital clothing or digitized versions of
Right.
physical clothing. Um, so most of the things you see are quite
Mm.
digital in that sense. Uh, and one other thing I reflected upon when visiting Metaverse Fashion Week was how, because there was after parties in the metaverse, and these metaverse after parties uh, often collaborated with a DJ or
Mm.
musician or anything. And some brands just had like a live stream from a DJ studio or the DJ's living room or something. So you saw like the physical DJ at a screen DJing. And this felt like, I don't know. And I think maybe this is the metaverse experience. What is real? What isn't? But like all these cartoonized avatars standing in this cartoonized space watching a DJ, which is physical. I don't know. It felt like, why are we doing this? What is the
Doesn't sound
point?
like the most fun party to me. Uh, but it's interesting that the
No,
fact that they're actually
but
showing digital, like avatar fashion. I think that shows the ambition for this, and because I would assume you could view this as a digital version of getting together and marketing sort of the physical brand or the physical clothes. And the other way to look at it is to actually market the avatar clothes, avatar garments, to be used in Decentraland or other metaverses. So uh, that seems interesting that they have that ambition.
yeah, definitely. And as on other fashion weeks, there was a lot of like panel
Mm.
talks, like discussing the
Yeah.
future. And in one of the panel talks, Tommy Hilfiger participated, and he talked a lot about like the opportunities of the metaverse. How will this? What are the opportunities? How will it develop? And as you all may know, Tommy Hilfiger is one of the frontiers when it comes to like digital fashion and all
Mm.
these things. They have been in. I don't know if you guys could help me, but I think they've been in Roblox or
Yeah.
participated in a lot of
Yeah.
games and things. Um, so they have been very early in this. And as he said, he sees this as the future. But uh, the big major challenge is maybe to have connect the metaverse or like the digital worlds with the future. How will this lead to people doing things in the physical world, or how could the physical world lead to the digital, like connecting these to become a sort of metaverse in which we live both physically and digitally? And i and i agree with that. Like, how could you make people being in Decentraland and then maybe have, I don't know, activations in the physical world, um, or that things that happening in Decentraland is reflected in the physical. Do you get this point?
Yeah, sure,
What I
sure.
mean?
It's interesting to hear. I mean, Tommy Hilfiger as a brand and as a designer has always been sort of, quick to pick up on current trends and finding collabs with. They're not so much creating pop cultural events as sort of piggybacking on everything that's happening, and it's fun to hear a 71-year-old. The designer, founder of the brand, talking about that this is the future. Super interesting. But I guess it's anyone's guess where this will land, right? And how the use cases are going to play out.
Yeah, and I've also talked about how I know specifically Tommy Jeans, like the streetwear brand or the jeans brand. They've been on Roblox, like I said, Oliver. They've also been on Animal Crossing, so they're no stranger to this. They were kind of early in all of this. So, and I've talked about this before, how streetwear and street culture usually ties together with youth culture, I guess. And people that are into street culture and hip hop and stuff, they are usually also gamers, or they grew up if they're Gen Z or millennials. Also have a digital presence. So I think with these kind of brands like Tommy Hilfiger, streetwear, Tommy Jeans, I think for me it kind of makes a bit more sense than Gucci, for example. At least when talking about organic, hands-on things, hands-on skins and stuff.
Yeah, definitely. But speaking about Gucci and like tying the metaverses together, I'm on the Gucci Vault Discord, and some days ago they announced that or they sent out an invitation that all the people that bought this NFT drop will be invited to this secret event in LA at this date. And so a lot of like the building community thing around it.
Yeah.
And I think this is like what the metaverse is about. How can we get people being in the digital space, but then connect them to the physical space? And I think by doing so, as a brand, you could build like super strong and many brand ambassadors in these spaces. Like they are very much living the brand to the fullest. And so if brands could find this key or recipe to blend these worlds together, I think that will be very, very
Mm.
important, because otherwise it will just be um, a game, or two different things.
Yeah, and in
Yeah.
in the article you mentioned the sort of the technical difficulties, and even the curator David Cash, he kind of admits this, and I guess it's easy. We're sitting here talking about it, and it's easy to kind of laugh at this new situation, and we have this sort of cartoonish environment. But there's a reason we're covering this, and we do see a future for this. And I'm just curious about your own personal reflections. You're living there in the one of the most classic fashion cities on earth, really at the heart of the old school physical fashion industry. What has been your own reflection upon now covering this, but also now experiencing this Metaverse Fashion Week? Do you think this is the future, or is it just some kind of fad that will go over?
Like before Metaverse Fashion Week, I would say I've been. I don't want to say I would have been negative about the metaverse and digital fashion, but I've thought maybe it had its peak. Maybe it will be just a marketing trick, or like, yeah, in 5 years we will have forgotten all about it. But now, when like visiting these spaces, heard people talk about it, and experienced it myself like fully, I really think it won't change like the fashion system or the fashion industry at large. It won't. But it very much will be like an add on or a development of the fashion industry. And as fashion designers are being educated to like develop digital fashion, younger people, which is more digital native, will become part of the fashion industry. I think we will see new solutions, more creative solutions at this. So yeah, I think if we speak about metaverse and digital fashion at large, I think it very much has a place in the fashion industry. Yes.
Interesting to hear. We're gonna wrap it up, Oliver. I really want to thank you for dedicating so much of your time into writing this article, and now sharing your experiences with us here. Maybe as an end note, obviously we need to push and plug our new print issue, Scandinavian Mind issue 3, which focuses a lot on these new concepts of digital fashion. One of our cover stories is with Kerry Murphy of The Fabricant. He really talks about an emerging new digital fashion industry. So his point of view is this is definitely happening, and of course, in his sort of evangelical point of view, it's going to be bigger than the physical one. If he is right, it's anyone's guess. We'll definitely keep covering this. But just as a side note, as an end note, just to pick up on what you just said, Oliver, and we could tease here a little bit that we will be continuing our coverage. We are working on a new or a dedicated report on the digital fashion system that will be launched later this year. But you're also looking into the educational system, and you are a lecturer yourself. You find this fascinating. I know you're working on a bigger story about the how the fashion schools of the world is handling this topic. Can you tease anything about this, and maybe just the setup for this article that you're working on?
Yeah. So I've been thinking a lot about like within the tech world and like this digital fashion world, everything is happening at such a pace. It's like a new thing each week. And I think for a lot of people and brands, it could be hard to like keep up at this pace. And so coming from like the academic world, studied for many years and now working with it, that's a world which is not very quick in that sense. Things take time to adapt. It needs to go through different instances and etc. So I thought like, how are fashion schools and fashion design schools adapting these technologies, and like, do they think this is the future, or just a fad that will go away? And yeah, all the schools and institutions I've talked to, the views are very, very different from each other. Some are very adaptive, and some, let's say, are not. I think it's reflecting also, like, if you look at the industry as a whole, you know, just take the luxury industry and look at LVMH on one side and Kering at the other. Like,
two very different views, and I really look forward to your coverage on how the fashion educational system is tackling this. We need to wrap up now. Oliver Dahle, our editor-at-large from Florence, Italy, thank you so much for sharing your thoughts. We have been here with Erik Sedin, our junior editor, who's also the editor of this show. Don't forget to sign up to our newsletter. Visit scandinavianmind.com/newsletter not to miss out on any upcoming stories and events. This has been great, guys. Thank you so much.
thank you.
Thank you.